Golden State Take. It's Golden State Take.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Golden State Take. My name is Yanni. We have a lot to talk about today. Obviously, we're going to start with the NFL draft that just concluded this weekend. We'll also talk A's and Giants, an update on how they've been doing over the past week, and then we'll finish things off with just a quick talk about the Sharks and what I think they need to do this offseason in order for them to get over that hump and be a playoff team next year. But first, got to start with the draft. The Niners were busy. They came into the draft with 6 picks. They finished with 8. Made a ton of trades throughout the course of the weekend. So we'll talk about some their draft picks and a little bit after I um, did some film on them, watched a couple games, just try to get a little bit of good analysis for you guys so you guys know what to kind of prepare for this year. So with the first pick, or their first pick in the draft was round 2, 33rd pick. They took Deshaun Stribling. Now, they originally had the 27th pick in the draft, and they traded back to 30th. And then when they were up on the clock again at 30th, they traded out of the first round and then got the first pick in the second round. So normally when something like that happens, there's obviously two scenarios or two reasons why. The first scenario is when they were at 27, they had a group of players that they really liked, knew that they'd be there at 30. They made the trade back to 30. Those players were still there, figured they can get a couple more picks, get back or trade a little bit further back, still get the guy they wanted. The other scenario is they were at 27. They had a guy that they liked. They thought he would be there at 30, so they traded back, and that player would have gotten taken either with the 27th, 28th, or 29th pick. And so they needed to veer a different direction, so they traded back into day 2. And we'll never know what really happened. They'll never admit what really happened. But anyways, they took Deshaun Stribling with the 33rd pick in the draft. I like this receiver. He's a big body guy, 6'2", over 200 pounds already. Is really good at contested catches. Can go downfield and can be a deep threat as he did in college. I don't see him being a I don't see him having a huge I don't see them using him in a lot of different ways, really, especially early on. I don't think he has a great route tree or a very versatile route tree just yet. I mean, he's still a young player, but I primarily see him being used as, a guy who can go deep, but also, again, those contested catches, being a more or less a, possession receiver. You saw him run a lot of comebacks, some digs, and, go routes. Those were the main really the only routes he really ran consistently at Ole Miss, and so I like him, but again, I don't see him being, especially early on, a huge playmaker for this team. Um, with their second pick was in round 3, the 70th pick in the draft. They took D lineman Romello Height. Now, after watching some film on Romello, he's obviously a good pass rusher. He has a couple of moves he really goes to. One is just a bull rush, but the second move is he really likes to spin inside. That's pretty much his go-to that he really likes to do. He's going to be a guy that, especially early on in his career, is going to be primarily, I think, used for passing down situations. And obvious passing down situations like third down. I really don't see him being an every down defensive end. Um, the reason why I say that is his support and his run defense leaves a lot to be desired. He's okay when he's on the weak side, and his pursuit is pretty good actually. But when they're running at him, he gets kind of, once the offensive linemen get their hands on him and get inside positioning on him, uh, it's pretty easy for them to get him out of the way. And so he needs to definitely work on his run support for sure. This was really his only big year. He had double digit sacks for the first time in his college career. So a little bit of a late bloomer. So we'll see, just how much more he can develop. And again, I think if, the pass rush, I think, is there. I think that's what he's going to make his career on if he does, have a sustained success in the league. But definitely going to need to work on his his size, adding more strength, and his run game ability or stopping the run game is going to be huge for him to become a every down defensive end. So that was their second pick. Their other third round pick, who this is actually a pick I really like. This was probably my favorite pick. Was Kalon Black, running back out of Indiana. He split time at Indiana. He wasn't the bell cow, but I thought he played really well. He was definitely the more efficient running back down the stretch for Indiana. He's 5'9", over 200 pounds, so he's not the biggest guy running back, but I think he adds a nice punch, or could add a nice punch with the CMC. The reason why I really do like this pick, and I think it's going to work out for them, is the Niners used CMC so much last year, and for people like me who benefited from fantasy football, obviously it was great to watch. But he had over 400 touches last year, and they brought in Brian Robinson before the season started to hopefully take some of that pressure and take some of those carries off of CMC. And for whatever reason, it didn't pan out. Like I said, CMC had over 400 total touches last year. Brian Robinson had less than 100 carries. I believe he had 90 or around that. So he had about 6 carries a game on average. So he was pretty much hardly utilized. And I don't know if that's because he just didn't fit into their scheme, or if that's more to do with the coaching staff and just only really having trust in CMC. But nevertheless, they got to find a way to get CMC off the field a little bit and give him some rest and have somebody else be there to get the run game going, especially with this receiving core, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later now that the draft's over. Um, I know they signed Mike Evans, and I like the signing, but they don't have a a dominant presence outside. I don't believe right now, and then with the George Kittle injury, that's only going to hurt them more. And so I do think they're going to rely heavily on the run game this year, and obviously CMC is going to be the vocal point of that and what he can do in the pass game. But like I said, for CMC being going to be 30 years old this year, has dealt with injuries in his career, you definitely want to preserve him for the end of the year and make sure he's playing his best football come December and January. And so I think Kalon Black will provide that extra boost for them. From watching some of his film, like I said, he's not the biggest guy. He definitely likes, if he can, to get to the outside. He definitely likes to run outside of the tackles, which is fine. But he is fast. He's got some speed to him, got a little bit of pop. But I think it'll be a nice change from him and CMC, because CMC last year, although he had an amazing year numbers wise, it just didn't seem like he had that acceleration that he once had. And again, you could point to the offensive line as to why that could have been the case. But um, he there was very few plays that he broke off last year. Again, he was just more of he had so much quantity, and so his numbers were obviously going to be inflated because of that. And so I think getting another guy in there will help him out, and also again provide a different look and something else defenses are going to have to account for. So as far as his receiving production, which is a little bit of people have had concerns about that. He only had 4 catches this year. I wouldn't really put that so much on him as much as Indiana's offense. I mean, the other running back, I believe his name is Hemby or something. He only had 17 catches in the season, so he was only averaging about one a game. So I'm not too overly concerned about that. Again, until he shows that he just cannot produce in the as a receiving back, um, then we'll worry about that when that time comes. But for right now, I'm going to go with more on. It was just more of Indiana's offensive structure and style of play and the way they ran their offense. The other thing too is, even if he's not a good receiving running back, CMC is one of the best receiving running backs we've ever seen. So it's not like, you know, I mean, CMC is going to be the third down back and in on, he's going to get a ton of receiving work this year too. So you don't really need that from Black to have a big receiving numbers. As long as what I'm looking for with him is if he can come in and provide you 7 to 10 quality runs per game and give CMC a breather. And then maybe if CMC, instead of having 25 total touches a game, you get that down closer to 20. I think that's going to bode well for the Niners overall throughout the season and long term. So again, I did really like that pick. Next, they have four fourth round picks. So the first one was defensive lineman Grayson Halton. Um, I like him a lot. I think with him, his numbers aren't anything crazy. I think he had 3.5 sacks last year, but he did a great job at getting into the backfield. He has a really good jump off the ball, off the line of scrimmage, and like I said, he gets back there. And for a D lineman, again, I believe he's probably going to be playing inside. You don't necessarily need to have the best numbers or the most sacks, but if you can just provide pressure and um, get in the quarterback's eyes and make him have to break out of the pocket, and you push those linemen back a couple of yards and provide pressure that way, that's totally fine. And I think he did a really good job of that last year. So again, now that we're heading toward the end of, we're heading to the mid rounds, fourth, fifth rounds, it you wouldn't want to say or expect any of these guys to be legit starters year one. These guys are more of, if they can come in a rotation and produce, and over the next couple of years, their roles start to grow in this organization. That's what you're really looking for. I find it hard to believe that any of these guys are going to just step in um, week one or this season outside of Stribling. I find it hard to believe any of these guys are just going to step in day one and be starters. So again, liked what I saw from him this year. I'm not too worried about the numbers side of things. I think um, he can provide some pressure up the middle, and I think that's what they were looking for with that pick. Um, Took them to their fifth pick in the draft to take an offensive lineman, um, Carver Willis. Again, with the offensive lineman, and this is for him and their last pick, their fifth round pick, Enrique Cruz. These guys are going to be rotation guys. Don't know a ton about them. I'll have to watch them in the preseason and do a little bit more research on them. But again, not expecting these guys to come in and be, day one starters, or I expect them to be maybe fighting for a spot, but ultimately being backups and good depth guys. So again, that's really all I have for the offensive linemen. For their next fourth round pick, 139th overall, they took a cornerback out of Washington. Don't even want to try his first name. Presock is his last name. 6'4" cornerback. Typically with these super long quarterbacks, um, 6'4" is very tall, and you don't really see a ton of them have a lot of success in the NFL. Um, with him, he's got some decent coverage skills. Okay tackling again with these taller cornerbacks. Usually they're not going to be great tacklers just for getting down low and getting good positioning on tackling. They're usually not the best. Um, but again, this late in the draft, I think he's going to come in, be a nice rotation piece, maybe a third or fourth corner for this team. Hopefully, he can grow into a pretty good coverage corner. He's got some decent speed. One thing I did notice about him is he does really likes to play far back. A lot of the film I watched on him, it was he's 8 to 10 yards off the receiver. So again, I don't know if that's just how Washington like to play their corners, because he's got some decent speed. So I don't see why he would need to do all that, especially with his 6'4" frame. You would think he'd want to get his long arms and try to get up on receivers and take them off their routes. So we'll see if that changes with the new defensive scheme. But again, hopefully he can be a good special teams guy for them early on. Come in when needed, play some spot time, and just show improvement over the next couple of years. I think that's what you're looking for from him. Next fourth round pick, Jaden Duggar, linebacker. Again, here late fourth round pick. Um, Not surprising they took it, considering with the trade that they had with D Winters. But again, I see more of a special teams guy. If I think with players like this, especially linebackers, if you can show a presence on special teams and make and carve out a role that way, that'll be his path to getting on the field eventually. I mean, he does have some really great linebackers to learn from with Warner and Greenlaw. So I hopefully he takes that. They take him under his wing, and he is a sponge and can soak up all the information from them, because those are two guys you definitely want to learn from. But for the time being, again, being more of a special teams role for him is going to be his way onto the field. And then again, round five, and Enrique Cruz, like I mentioned, first with the other offensive linemen, guys that are going to, if again, also if these guys make the team, again, that's never a guarantee, but if they do, be nice depth, and maybe potentially can become starting guards in this league. But the other thing I wanted to go over with the draft is they traded D Winters for a fifth round pick to Dallas. This trade was a little bit shocking for me personally. I thought D Winters had a really good year, especially with the injury to Warner. He was the leading tackler on the team. He had over 100 tackles, 25 years old, and so to only get really a fifth round pick for him, I didn't really understand what was the purpose of making this trade. And you could say, well, you have Warner coming back, you have Greenlaw you signed. Um, so you have those guys there, but to me that's the reason why you keep Winters is because over the last 2 years, Dre Greenlaw has dealt with injuries, has suffered from injuries. Warner had his ankle that he was dealing with, missed most of last year. And at the end of the day, this is a violent game. They play a violent position, and so you can't just expect there to not be injuries. And so to have D Winters there, even if he wasn't going to be a starter, but in a backup role, he showed he can come in and produce and be a solid linebacker when needed. And so again, being also only 25, there is some room to grow there. So again, I didn't really fully understand that trade. Probably would not have done it, especially only getting a fifth rounder back. But nevertheless, that was the other trade that was made. So just a couple of things I wanted to go over more offensively with this team now that the draft's over, and again, assuming there's no big trades really coming up. I wanted to go over the receiving depth for this team and talk about that with the running backs. Again, I know we talked about McCaffrey a little bit, but just kind of what to expect from the skilled positions this year. Um, and so right now you have Mike Evans, Ricky Pearsall, Christian Kirk, Demarcus Robinson, and Stribling. Those are going to most likely be your five receivers that make the team out of camp. They may have six, but for sure those five. And then Tonjes and Farrell are going to be your two tight ends, obviously with Kittle being out with the Achilles tear. So overall, my first thoughts on this group is there's a lot of unknowns right now, really. And the reason why I say that is, Evans, you know what he's going to be, you know what Robinson's going to be. I still think the jury's still out on Pearsall as far as how good he can be. He showed some flashes last year. I'm not really going to take his rookie year. You know, I'm not going to judge him too much with his rookie year, just considering everything that happened before the season with him getting shot and just not only the physical part of rehabbing that, but just the mental part of things. Um, I know that year was just a roller coaster for him, so I'm not judging him off his rookie year. But last year I saw some good things out of him. But again, he's still growing. He's still a player that has a lot to prove. Christian Kirk, the last few years has not been very good. His production has continuously gone down. I'd imagine he's going to be more of their slot receiver. And again, I wouldn't even, to be honest, I wouldn't even be shocked if, Christian Kirk, if there's a player that makes a lot of noise out of camp that maybe they weren't really anticipating. Out of these five players, he's the player that obviously I think is most likely that could even get cut before the final 53-man roster is named. But um, yeah, so again, he's been in the league a long time. I think he's just down at the tail end of his career, and then Stribling, obviously a rookie. You never know how that's going to go. I mean, some rookie receivers come in and are wide receiver ones day one and never look back. Some take a little bit longer. Demarcus Robinson, I do like Demarcus Robinson overall. I think he's got some talent, but at the end of the day, he's been in the league for almost a decade now. You know what he is. He's a guy that's probably going to be a 2 to 4 targets per game type of guy. He might have a game or two where he goes off similar to how he did um, I believe it was against the Eagles, I believe, in the playoffs, where he just had a really crazy game. So he's capable of it, but you're not going to expect that consistently out of him. And then Mike Evans, you kind of know what you're going to get from Mike Evans. Um, Tonjes and Farrell, I think, did a good job with Kittle out last year when he had his hamstring injury. But again, for a full season, it remains to be seen. There's a lot of questions and marks about the productivity of the tight ends now that Kittle's not going to be here next year. So again, a lot of question marks with these skilled positions. I would think they would try to utilize Mike Evans very heavily in this offense. My only concern is Mike Evans has never really been obviously Mike Evans is a really good receiver. He's had a great career, but When you look at his numbers, he's especially when you're talking targets. I was looking at his career, and over the last 8 years, he's really just been a guy that averages about 7 or 8 targets, which isn't bad. That's obviously still ranked pretty high in the National Football League, but my point is he's not a wide receiver one that's going to require or that's going to expect 12 to 15 targets a game like a Puka Nakua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase. And so especially now going into his 33-year-old season, I would think he's going to be more of a, again, 6 to 8 targets a game type of guy. He's going to have games this year where he goes over 100 yards. He'll have 5 catches for a buck 25, but then he's going to have games this year where he has 3 catches for 40 yards. That's just kind of how Mike Evans' career has gone. And so I think this is going to be a lot of wide receiver by committee or receiving tight ends by committee this year. I don't see a guy outside of really Evans that's going to garner all the attention or be a clear wide receiver two for this team or someone to go off of Mike Evans. So I think that's really up for the taking. Whether it's Pearsall in his third year or Stribling in his rookie year, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But as a whole with the draft, I think for coming into the weekend with 6 picks, picking up a couple extra picks in the draft. Obviously, I know maybe some Niner fans were hoping for a big splash or something, but I think they did okay with what they had. I give them a B for the overall for the draft. So obviously, time will tell as far as how good these players end up being or not end up being. We're 2, 3, 4 years away from even having this conversation again. But again, give them that benefit of the doubt. So I'll give them a B for the draft. So that's everything with the Niners. Moving on to baseball, got the A's and Giants. This past week, over the last 10 games, the A's are 5-5. My player of the week is Carlos Cortez. He's batting 542 with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs this week. He's just been a monster. Um, Overall, they've been. I mean, they're 500 the last 10 games, so they've had some ups and downs. Some players that have been struggling over the past week and a half is Max Muncy and Lawrence Butler. Muncy's batting 239 on the year now. He was batting the first 15 games of the year. He was up above 300, so that's come down quite a bit. And then Butler's averaging 186 right now, so definitely struggling in the batter's box for Butler. So hopefully they can turn that around. Right now, they're ninth in runs given up, which at 123 runs given up. So not great. But again, we kind of predicted that. But it's actually surprising that they're ninth, worst in the league, considering they've had 3 shutouts, and I believe 2 games where they've only given up 1 run. So that's actually kind of crazy to think about. They're 19th in opposing batting average, 246. So middle of the pack there, but they're first in the AL West. A couple other guys just wanted to give my thoughts on so far. Nick Kurtz, 16 straight games with a walk. I believe that I don't know if that broke the record or tied the record. I know Ricky Henderson held the record, but I mean, again, he's finding a way to get on base any way he can. His power is starting to come through now. He's starting to hit some more home runs compared to the beginning of the year. Jacob Wilson's really hitting the ball well. He's seeing the ball well. I like they've changed up their lineup a little bit, but I do like Jacob Wilson I actually would like him leading off. I think they put him there for a game or two. As far as you know how I would do the lineup right now, I do like Wilson lead off, Langoliers second, Kurtz three, Soderstrom four, and then or I would actually put Cortez four, Soderstrom five, and then as far as down the rest, McNeil six. I would put I'd probably put Muncie seven and then Butler eight, Clark nine. That's kind of how I would do it. I know they've really liked Nick Kurtz leading off for some reason, but I kind of like him batting in that third spot there. So that's again what I would do with the A's. But again, they're playing solid ball. Like I said, they're first in the AL West, which is you told them that 30 games in, they definitely would have taken it. So not too overly concerned about them. Again, if they make the playoffs, that'd be great, but we still got a long way to go. But I think they're definitely meeting expectations for what they had set for this year. As far as the Giants go, biggest issue with the Giants, although they're playing well and they're 7-3 in their last 10 games, and they took 2 or 3 from the Dodgers, which you take no matter what. The series with the Dodgers, even though they won both or two of those games, they only scored in the three total games. They only scored in 2 innings. They had the opening game of the series, they had a three. They put up a three spot in the first inning, and then Bailey hit a 3-run home run late in the second game, and then they got shut out in the series finale. So again, you'll take it. Winning 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers is never easy, no matter how you do it. But their bats were definitely struggling, and part of the reason why their bats are struggling, outside of Jung Hoo Lee, who's my player of the week, batting 571 this week, he's turned his game around. He's done a 180 from the beginning of the year to now, so he's finally getting in a groove. But the biggest reason why the lack of production is the two of their best hitters has just been really struggling pretty much all year. Adames has been a little bit better than Devers, but Adames is struggling this past couple of series, not hitting the ball well. He's chasing out of the strike zone, and then Devers has been a nightmare all year, to be honest. In 28 games, and that's the other thing. We're getting to a sample size now where that's pretty big. I'd understand if we were a week into the season, or 3 series in, and he's struggling. But we're 30 games in, or 28 games for Devers, but we're about a fifth of the way through the year. He's got 2 home runs and he's batting 216. So if you were to average that out. And again, I'm sure he'll go on a run at some point. He is a streaky hitter. I'm sure he'll have a month where, he goes crazy. But if you were to average that out, I mean, he's on pace for, about 12 home runs this year, which again, if Devers has 12 home runs this year, that would be absolutely insane. I don't expect that to happen. But my point is, he's not doing what they expected him to do and what they need him to do. Overall, with the pitching staff, Webb's been that's probably the best way I could say it. Just he's ERA is 4.86. Um, Roop is 255 and Ray's 270. Those have been the two best pitchers for this team. Roop's been on a tear his last couple starts, and so then Hauser and Malley have been bad. Hauser's ERA's jumped to 7.36 and Malley's is 5.26. So with this team, there's a clear separation between the Dodgers and Padres, and then the Diamondbacks, Giants, and Rockies, and I'm sure that's going to be that way for this entire year. So again, kind of how I talked about at the beginning of the year, the last few years for the Giants have been very. They've just been in the middle of the pack, hovering around 500, and I think that's just going to be more of what we see this year. They're 13 and 15 now. We're going to see times where they're playing decent baseball, and then we're going to see times where they're playing very bad. And so I don't think I think we're what we've seen over the last 28 games. I think we're just going to see the rest of this year, and I think they're going to end up probably hovering around 500 like we saw last year. And right now with their pitching, although their pitching hasn't been terrible, it's definitely hasn't been good enough um, to carry them in their lack of offense right now. And at some point your star players, your big name guys have to come through and start playing well. So we'll see if that changes. Right now, the Giants are seventh in opposing batting average at 229. And I have a couple comparisons between the Giants and the A's just to kind of see, where they're stacking up amongst both of them. And right now, the Giants have more hits than the A's. They have 236 hits to the A's 229, and they have a better team batting average. They're batting 250 as a team. A's are 241. Where it gets ugly for the Giants is uh, the on base percentage for the A's. They're 18th at 316, and the Giants are 28th at 295. So they're third to last in on base percentage, and they are dead last in home runs this year. I believe they have 19 home runs, which is last in the MLB. A's are a little bit more middle of the pack. I believe they're at 33 right now. So the Giants' lack of power. I know they've hit a few recently the last couple games, but their lack of power this year has been a real problem. And again, goes back to a guy like Devers, who you hope to have probably 30 plus coming into the year, and he only has two now. Right now, I believe Schmidt is their Schmidt has 4, and he's their leading home run. He has the most home runs on the team, and Ramos I think has 3, and I think he's second. So definitely need some guys to get some power into this lineup, whether that's you know again, Devers coming out of a slump, or calling up Bryce, or whatever you have to do to get some more pop in this lineup. I think you have to do it because again, we're getting to the point now where the sample size is big enough to I don't want to say panic, but I think changes are going to start needing to be made at this point. So that's my take on the A's and Giants so far the last week and a half. Last thing I want to talk about is the Sharks. We did the player gradings for the season. Now I just kind of want to talk about briefly what I think the Sharks need coming into next year. And again, they just missed out on the playoffs this year. Overall, had a successful year, but next year is going to be all about taking that next step, making the playoffs. And what I think this team needs in order to get to that point are a couple things. And so this is my Sharks offseason agenda. This is everything I think the Sharks need to do. And if they do these things, I would consider this a very successful offseason for this team. So my first thing is get a goal scorer. Now, I know that sounds simple and obvious, but what I mean by that is this team has a ton of playmakers, guys who are good at setting other guys up. Will Smith I would consider him more of a playmaker than a scorer. Although he can't score and he popped over 20 goals this year, I consider him more of an elite playmaker. Macklin's everything. He can do it also. Macklin's a goal scorer as well as a playmaker, but you know, Eklund is not a goal scorer. Eklund's a playmaker. Alex Wenberg, although he had a career high in goals this year, he's been in the league for over a decade, and 17 is his career high in goal scorer. That's not a goal scorer. Tyler Toffoli in his prime, even a few years ago, that's a goal scorer. Somebody that when you give him an opportunity, he's going to bury it. And somebody that can net you 25, 30 goals consistently year over year. And this team really doesn't have that. I mean, again, Celebrini at 45 this year. Celebrini is amazing. Sherwood had 23, but I don't with Sherwood, I like Sherwood a lot, but I don't really expect that number to stay there. I do think his goal scoring numbers have been inflated the last couple of years playing with the Canucks, and the Canucks being such a bad team. He was put in very favorable positions, very similar to how Zetterlund was with the Sharks. And again, I love Fabian Zetterlund. I was very upset when the Sharks traded him, but he definitely was being on a bad team helped him. Again, being on the number one power play, being in the top 6, and his numbers got inflated because of that. And ever since he got traded to Ottawa, he had a solid year this year. I'm not trying to say he didn't, but his numbers have come down a little bit. And I don't think we're ever going to see a guy like Zetterling get back up to that 20 goal per game mark like he was with the Sharks a couple of years ago. I see the same thing with Sherwood. So although I would love to see Sherwood hover around 25 goals like he did this year. He had 23, I believe. I don't realistically see that, especially as the Sharks get better. I see Kiefer Sherwood being more of a 15 to 20 guy, somewhere around that mark over the next few years, which is totally fine. I'm not trying to say that's not. Again, he has other elements in his game that the Sharks really needed, like his physicality. So if he gets you, 17, 18 goals next year, I'm cool with that. But again, not an elite goal scorer. Again, Colin Graff had, career high. He had over 20 goals this year. But again, I wouldn't consider Colin Graff an elite goal scorer. And so the Sharks, I think, need to find a guy that, whether it's to pair with Macklin or even have on the second line, just somebody in the top 6 that um, when he gets the opportunity, he's going to bury them more times than not. And I think there are a lot of times this year that this team was lacking that and relying a lot on guys who aren't necessarily considered goal scorers to be goal scorers. And so I think getting one of those guys is going to do a lot for this team. So I really hope that, Mike Greer can find a way to do that, whether it's, again, what all this is via trade or, signing somebody that's a free agent. So however they have to do it. But I do think getting a goal scorer that's going to be that 25 to 30 plus goals um, is going to be, I think, would be crucial for this team to get over that hump. The other thing they need desperately is not one, but I think they need 2 top four D men. And I don't mean two guys that can play top four for this current Sharks team. I mean two guys that around the league would be considered top four defensemen. You plug them in on, you know, I'm thinking of a playoff team like the Kings or Tampa Bay, like guys that whether it's on a bad team, a mediocre team, or a good team, are considered top four defensemen. I understand that where the Sharks' defense is as a whole this year, you're not going to revamp it all in one off season. So I'm not trying to say they need to. They should go out there and find a top number one defenseman like a Kale McCarr, an elite player, but they need to find two productive top four defensemen, guys that can eat 20 plus minutes a night, be really good in the defensive zone, produce and chip in offensively. Power play one guy maybe, or definitely a power play two guy, but just two guys that can do that. When they brought in Orlov played well, I think well overall for this team, and I do think Orlov is considered a top four defenseman, but he's definitely not a top pairing guy anymore. He's definitely a third, probably even a fourth guy at this point. So I think if next year we're coming back and Orlov is your third best defenseman coming into next year, I would consider that a successful offseason as far as the defense goes. And I think just by improving the defense a little bit is going to help this team tremendously. And overall, it's going to help. It helps everything. It's going to help the goaltending out. I think the goaltending will improve because of that. It's going to help your forwards out, being able to get the pucks to them in transition better, get the puck out of your own net. And so, again, I'm not saying they need to go out and redo this entire roster because I think the roster overall is in really good shape. But goal scorer, two top four D men, I think we're cooking. The last thing, extend your young players, and basically I just mean Celebrini and Smith. Now they are going into their last year of their ELC, which is your rookie contract, which is 3 years. So they're both going into their third season, and so they don't need to sign anything. If they don't sign this offseason, I'm not going to be worried that they're going to walk or leave. It is not very common to see guys sign their or extensions after 2 years. So again, if they don't, I'm not worried at all. But I do think it would be a good idea to get it done. The reason why is, Will Smith's number is going to be pretty big. Celebrini's number is going to be even bigger. I mean, I would imagine Celebrini's probably going to be in the neighborhood of 15 a year. Um, and Smith, I would probably guess, would be around 8, 9. That would be my guess. Um, but the thing is, the cap's going to be going up every year. And I think if you wait to do it next year, that 15 million is only, I think, going to go higher. If Will Smith messes around and is a 90-point guy next year, which definitely is possible. Again, especially if he's playing with Macklin, that number is going to balloon. And so I think if you get these deals done now, although 15 million sounds like a lot right now, which it is, 3 years from now, 15 million is not going to be considered what it is, and 6 years from now, 15 million is going to feel like a steal. Compared to, again, where the cap's going to be and what guys are going to be getting 5, 6 years from now. So I think you lock them up. I think celebrating you have to lock up for as long as you can. Obviously, with the new rule, I believe 7 years is the longest you can sign an extension for, or it's going to be 7 years. Right now, it's 8 years. Um, you give them the 8 year deal because at this point, Celebrini's going to be 20 here in this summer. When that deal's over, he's going to be 20, adding the ELC. He's going to be 29 years old. He's literally going to be in the prime of his career when that contract's up, and you give him another 8 years after that. The only risk with Celebrini, and it's not even risk, because the reason why I say that is because this is with every player is injury, but you can say that with everyone. He doesn't have a history of injury, but that's the only thing that's going to stop Macklin Celebrini from being a, probably the best player in the world. You know, 5, 6 years from now. I mean, he's already, I would consider him a top five player. Some people would even say top three. But 5, 6 years from now, there's a realistic likelihood he's going to be the best player in the world. And if you have that, or if he's the second best player in the world at 15 million 5 years from now, I think that's going to look like a steal. So get these contracts done now. The longer you wait, the more you're going to have to pay. And again, I don't anticipate things getting messy, but when you don't have contracts, you always leave. That's always a possibility of something happening. So get it done. Give them whatever they want. I hope they don't sign a bridge contract, which is like a 3 or 4 year deal. Which, again, if that's what they want, then obviously you give it to them. But I'm looking to sign these guys long term, 7, 8 years, get them locked in, and try to win some Stanley Cups in that process. So that's my offseason agenda. Get a great goal scorer or 25 plus goal scorer, two top four defensemen, and get Celebrini and Smith extended. Um, and I think if they do that, I would be very happy with this offseason. But that's going to do it for me tonight. We'll be back later this week, get some more updates on your A's, Giants, 49ers, Sharks. We'll talk a little bit more Warriors. There's nothing really going on with the Warriors as of recently, but with this whole Steve Kerr saga and situation, I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about there. But we'll see you guys later this week.